Welcome back to the AR-15 barrel series. Today, we'll be looking at a chrome 20-inch LMG HBAR barrel that was given to the channel by Cody at Red Right Hand LLC. I'll take the barrel through my normal inspection process and also shoot some groups with it. We'll actually be looking at two examples of this barrel because the first one actually had a chrome failure, which we'll look at more closely. But first, we'll start with the specs. The barrel is manufactured by Rosco Manufacturing to specifications laid out by Red Right Hand LLC. It's 20 inches, has a straight 0.980 inch profile from the barrel extension to the gas block journal. It also has a chrome lined bore and chamber with a phosphate exterior, 556 NATO chamber, 1-to-7 twist, half by 28 threads, and a rifle length gas system. There's nothing too out of the ordinary with the specs. After a brief visual inspection, nothing looks to be out of place. The only thing significant that I noticed was that the barrel does not have a dimple for the gas block set screw, which is something that I prefer to see on my barrels. Moving on to the inspection, we'll start with the weight, and the barrel comes in at over 3.3 pounds. And if we compare this to the other barrels that I've measured, the LMG HBAR is at the top of the chart for pounds per inch of barrel length. Moving on to some gauging, starting with the throat erosion gauge, and both of these barrels measure at a 1, which is what I would expect for new barrels. Next is the chamber dimensions gauge, which checks to make sure that the chamber and throat are at least minimum size, which is important for general function and ammunition compatibility, and both examples pass. Moving on to headspace, I'll be using a new stripped JP Bolt and Forster headspace gauges, starting with the minimum headspace gauge, and both barrels pass. Next, we have a 223 no-go gauge, or 556 NATO mid-range gauge, and both barrels fail this gauge, meaning that the headspace is larger than this gauge. So, we'll move on to the field gauge, and the bolts are not able to spin on the field gauge, which is good, so both barrels pass. And this means that both barrels are somewhere in the middle of the serviceable headspace range for a 556 NATO chamber. Next, we'll check out some external dimensions, starting with the barrel extension diameter, and there is a little bit of a difference between the two examples, but not much. Example 2 will have a tighter fit with the upper receiver compared to most other barrels that I've measured so far, and example 1 isn't too bad either, at right around average or slightly better. The gas block journal diameters measure almost exactly the same, which is pretty cool, and they'll both have a pretty tight tolerance with the gas block, which should make for a good gas seal. There was a slight difference in the gas port size, but both barrels look to be gassed pretty well, with gas ports that are much smaller than the 20-inch HBAR from Bear Creek Arsenal. Next up, I'll use my test-long Borescope to take a peek at the inside of the barrels, starting with barrel 1. This is the barrel as I received it, before I cleaned it or did anything else to it. The throat looks a bit uneven, which is a pretty common thing to see in AR barrels around this price range. The machining looks to be pretty typical. There's a little smearing and roughness on the right side of the rifling lands, so certainly not perfect, but nothing out of the ordinary. And here's the throat after shooting about 90 rounds through it. You can see it got pretty dirty. And here's what it looked like after a light cleaning. So sometimes it can be a little tricky to determine if what I'm seeing is chrome flaking or just carbon fouling. But usually, carbon fouling is a little bit more feathered around the edges and has a more subtle transition from the lighter chrome to the darker carbon. And when the chrome flakes away, there's a very distinct edge or line between the chrome and not chrome. Also, in some spots on this barrel, you can see that the chrome flaked away in little tiles. So, this barrel had a pretty catastrophic chrome failure within the first 90 rounds. And we'll come back to this a little bit later. Here's a look at the throat of barrel 2 as I received it. This looks pretty similar to barrel 1. There is a little bit of unevenness where the rifling starts. The rifling lands also look a bit rough, with some smearing on the right side. But again, considering that this barrel is intended for use in an LMG or auto rifle, this isn't too unexpected. Moving on to the rifling, here is barrel 1 again, as I received it. There are some decent looking tool marks, and there are some other small defects here and there, but nothing else really caught my eye. And here's a look at barrel 2. The tool marks look to be pretty similar to barrel 1. Obviously not ideal, but again, given the intended use for these barrels, nothing too unexpected. Barrel 2 also had some more significant defects, such as this decently large blemish. Cody suspected that the anode that was in place for the chrome may have accidentally bumped into the bore and left this mark here. So of course things like this are an added risk with chrome-lined barrels. There is also a spot on the chrome that was pretty rough on one of the rifling lands in barrel 2. Here's what it looked like before shooting, and here's a look at those spots after the groups and before I cleaned it. You can see that those rough patches grabbed onto some fouling, which isn't too surprising. I'm sure you can imagine, the copper jacket is basically getting sanded down a little bit and slightly deformed as it passes over these spots. We'll see how this affected the groups a little bit later. But also something to consider is that this will obviously affect the rate at which the barrel gets fouled, but it might also affect the BC of the bullet, which could cause some discrepancies with a ballistic solver when shooting at distance. Again, given the use case of this barrel, being intended for an LMG or auto rifle, BC variation may or may not be an important thing to consider, but at least it's something to be aware of. Here's a look at those same spots after I clean them up a little bit. It looks like they have smoothed out a touch, but they are certainly still there. And they might continue to smooth out further, but my guess is that they will largely remain there for the life of the barrel. Moving on, here's a look at the gas ports. Nothing too much to see here. They both look fine without any huge burrs or anything. And here's a look at the crown for barrel 1. You can see the tool marks in the rifling. Also, a few of the rifling lands look to have been deformed a little bit, probably from the live center when it was put in the lathe. But the cut on the leading edge of the crown looks pretty good. And the crown on barrel 2 looks pretty much the same. The tool marks in the rifling aren't quite as apparent, but the rifling is also a bit deformed on this barrel as well. The leading edge on the crown looks pretty good, but one spot might be a bit more rough than on barrel 1. Getting back to the chrome failure, after I discovered the issue, I showed the Borescope footage to Cody from Red Right Hand LLC, and he suspected that there was likely an adhesion issue with the chrome. Cody then immediately got in contact with Rosco to try to begin to track down the source of the problem. I also set the barrel back so that Red Right Hand and Rosco could take a look at things and see what they could see. And from what I was told, it sounds like the barrel wasn't properly prepped. But steps have been taken to resolve that issue. Cody also took the time to inspect the rest of his inventory to see if any of his other barrels might be affected. And he was able to send me out a replacement barrel within a week. Of course, it's regrettable that bad products get out sometimes, but it's unexpected situations like this that really let you see what a company is made of. Anyway, we'll go over the shooting setup and then head to the range. Regarding barrel break-in, Red Right Hand LLC and Rosco do not list a barrel break-in procedure, so no barrel break-in was performed. The barrel was fit into an upper receiver with a 15-inch Expo Arms handguard and a bolt carrier group from Classified Defense. When assembling the upper, the threads were greased and the barrel nut was torqued to the manufacturer's specification. To increase rifle stability during shooting, the handguard was fitted with a 3-inch front bag rider and the stock was supported by a rear bag. An A5 buffer system was used with an A5-2 buffer and Springco green spring. No muzzle device was used to prevent possible interference. The trigger was provided by AR Gold. The bore was fouled with a few rounds before shooting the first group. Scope was provided by Vector Optics and is their new Continental 6-36 by 56mm FFP PRS rifle scope. The scope features a 34mm main tube, HT shot lenses, and high definition glass, which provides 90% light transmission. The scope also has locking turrets, an illuminated reticle, and a zero stop. The optic is mounted in a vector mount, with all fasteners torqued appropriately. A Garmin Zero C1 Pro chronograph was used to collect velocity data. A Mantis X10 Elite was mounted to the front of the handguard to keep track of rifle stability and detect any possible shooter-induced flyers. Groups were measured using the Ballistic X app. Each group has 30 shots. This simulates a match or other practical type scenario where the barrel will get some heat into it, and also gives us a decent sample size to work with. Between each group, I used a chamber chiller and leaf blower for cooldown. Distance was 100 yards. Point of aim was a small circle at the bottom of the target. Point of impact was set a few inches higher to preserve the aiming point. Wind was monitored with a ribbon. Each 30-shot group took about 4 minutes to shoot and was edited down to about 25 seconds. Red Right Hand LLC also provided the ammunition for this video, and we'll be going over a total of 7 groups between the 2 barrels. First, both barrels will be shooting Hornady 73 grain ELD Match, then Federal Gold Medal 69 grain Sierra MatchKings. After that will be Winchester M193, and last, barrel 2 will shoot Federal Gold Medal 77 grain Sierra MatchKings. Alright, let's do it. Okay, the first group that we're looking at here is with the Hornady 73 grain ELD Match. I've had some pretty good luck with this load. It's put up some pretty solid groups for me thus far. So, we'll see what I'm able to get from these barrels. It's also priced pretty well. It's not cheap, but it's less expensive than I would have thought. Anyway, for both barrels, shooting felt fine on my end. I don't feel like I pulled any of the shots. Both barrels had forward ejecting brass, but gas port size seemed fine, and the recoil and bolt carrier velocity felt pretty soft. So, I feel like these barrels weren't overgassed. Forward ejecting brass just happens sometimes. Wind was pretty calm for both groups. The Garmin picked up the velocity for all shots on both barrels, and the Mantis missed a few shots. Anyway, we will finish up the group and then take a closer look. Before going over the numbers, I just want to take a quick second to thank everyone that's subscribed to the channel. I really appreciate the continued support. Every like, comment, and subscription helps the channel grow, which allows me to get access to more resources, create more content, and invest in better equipment to capture even better data. And for those of you who haven't subscribed yet, now is a great time to do so. I've already got several more barrels, uppers, and rifles evaluated, and I just need to find the time to edit all of those videos. So there's a lot more content on the way that you won't want to miss. And the best way to stay up to date is to subscribe to my channel right here on YouTube. So again, thanks to everyone who's already part of the community. I really appreciate you helping me keep this going. And there's a lot more coming soon. And with that, we'll get back to it. Alright, so here's all my velocity data for the Hornady 73 grain ELD Match. And this is sorted by barrel length. Barrel 1 had an average velocity of 2,630 feet per second, which is a little bit slower than barrel 2, which had an average velocity of 2,642 feet per second. And both of those are a bit slower than the nitride version of this barrel that I shot a few weeks ago, which had an average velocity of 2,669 feet per second. Moving on to the velocity standard deviations, both barrels had SDs that are among the highest I've seen with this load, with barrel 1 having an SD of 27 feet per second, and barrel 2 having an SD quite a bit higher at 37 feet per second. Looking at the individual shot data, with barrel 1, shot 13 was the fastest by a decent amount, at 68 feet per second faster than average, and it also had 3 shots that were particularly slow. And then with barrel 2, shot 9 was really slow, at 102 feet per second slower than average. Rifle stability looked fine on both barrels, with barrel 1 averaging 99.6 and barrel 2 averaging 99.7. So I don't think that I pulled any of the shots on either barrel, and it looks like I shot both barrels about as even as I could. Looking at the group for barrel 1, looks like a few shots struck up a little high and a little low, but still a really nice looking cluster there in the middle. And then looking at the group for barrel 2, it looks pretty evenly distributed, without anything significantly out of place. Before we go over the group stats, we'll go over my AZ score for the new folks. AZ stands for A-zone equivalence distance, and it gives you the maximum distance where the calculated group size would still fit into a USPSA A-zone. The reason why I use this score is because it's easier for me to make sense of the numbers instead of looking at the raw mean radius numbers. Getting back to it, for barrel 1, 30-shot group size ended up at 2.026 MOA, with a 30-shot mean radius of 0.432 MOA, which gives us an AZ score of 327 yards. And barrel 2 did a little bit worse, with a 30-shot group size of 1.944 MOA, and a 30-shot mean radius of 0.559 MOA, which gives us an AZ score of 252 yards. If you want some more conventional numbers to look at, if we take the 30-shot group and break it down into 3 10-shot groups, for barrel 1, the average 10-shot group size was 1.3 MOA, and for barrel 2, the average 10-shot group size was 1.5 MOA. And here's a look at the leaderboard for Hornady 73 grain ELD Match. I've tried to keep things as consistent as I can between the different barrels that I've shot, given the time and budget that I have to work with. So, things aren't perfectly controlled, but I'm doing the best I can with what I got. Anyway, I have 12 groups on this leaderboard, and barrel 1 came in a pretty respectable 6th place, and barrel 2 did a bit worse, coming in 10th. And both of the chrome barrels did better than the nitride LMG nitride barrel, which is currently in 11th place. So, not a bad start for either barrel. And as a reminder, barrel 1 had the chrome failure. Of course, I didn't realize that until I got home and inspected the barrel after shooting it, and I was pretty surprised that it shot that well. And then barrel 2 had a blemish in the bore, and also a rough patch of chrome. So, we will continue on from here and see what the other groups look like. Alright, second group that we're looking at here is with Federal Gold Medal 69 grain series MatchKings. I haven't shot much of this ammo, so we'll see how it goes. Brass was ejecting forward again with both barrels. Despite that, the shooting experience felt fine. Recoil and bolt carry velocity felt normal. I don't think either barrel is overgassed. Ejection pattern just doesn't tell the full story all the time. Anyway, my shooting felt fine again. I was confident in all the shots. Wind was fine, so no issues there. The Garmin recorded the velocities for all the shots, and the Mantis missed a few shots. So, we will finish up here and then take a closer look. Alright, here's all my velocity data for the Federal 69 grain series MatchKings, and obviously I don't have a lot to compare to here. Barrel 1 had the slowest velocity out of the 20-inch barrels, with an average of 2,722 feet per second, and barrel 2 was a little bit faster at 2,746 feet per second. And the nitride barrel was just a little bit slower than that. Both chrome barrels ended up with the same velocity SD at 27 feet per second. Moving on to the individual velocity for barrel 1, nothing looks to be out of place, and rifle stability looked fine with an average of 99.5. And looking at barrel 2, the barrel looks to have sped up a little bit after the first 12 shots or so, which is a little interesting. And then rifle stability looked fine on barrel 2 with an average of 99.7. Looking at the group for barrel 1, the shape of the group looks a little bit odd, but overall, a pretty respectable group. And then for barrel 2, the group looks pretty even without anything significantly out of place. Barrel 1 ended up with a 30-shot group size of 2.111 MOA, and a 30-shot mean radius of 0.557 MOA, which gives us an AZ score of 253 yards. And the numbers for barrel 2 were about the same, with a 30-shot group size of 2.199 MOA, and a 30-shot mean radius of 0.553 MOA, which gives us an AZ score of 255 yards. And breaking things down into 10-shot groups, barrel 1 had an average 10-shot group size of 1.6 MOA, and barrel 2 had an average 10-shot group size of 1.4 MOA. And not much to look at here on the leaderboard. The only other barrels I have so far are the Red Right Hand Nitride barrel, and my clapped out Criterion core barrel with 15,000 rounds through it. But the two LMG HBAR chrome barrels are in the number 1 and 2 spots by a pretty decent amount. So with that, we'll keep moving on. Okay, moving on to the Winchester M193. This will be the last group for barrel 1, and then we'll have another group to look at after this for barrel 2. If you've watched my video series at all, you'll know that my journey with Winchester M193 has been full of surprises, mostly bad surprises. And spoiler, these groups continue with that trend and end up being pretty bad. But for the sake of science, we'll do it anyway and see what we can see. These Winchester M193 groups have mostly served as a reminder of how much bad ammo can have a negative impact on the performance of a barrel. Anyway, brass continued ejecting forward. Recoil and bolt carry velocity felt fine though. Shooting went good on my end. Wind was pretty calm. The Garmin picked up every shot. The Mantis missed a bunch though. And we will finish up here and then take a closer look. Here's all my velocity data for the Winchester M193, as sorted by barrel length. And here are things narrowed down to just 20-inch barrels. Barrel 1 had an average velocity of 3,246 feet per second, and barrel 2 was a little bit slower at 3,233 feet per second. And both of those barrels were slower than the BCA and nitride LMG HBAR barrels with this ammo. Moving on to the standard deviations, barrel 1 had an SD of 25 feet per second, which is about average to slightly below average of what I've seen from this load. And barrel 2 had an SD of 34 feet per second, which is on the higher end. Looking at the individual data, nothing looks too abnormal with the velocities for either barrel, and rifle stability looks fine as well. Looking at the group for barrel 1, obviously this is a pretty bad looking group, and there were two significant outliers. Shot 13 went really high, and shot 25 went really far to the right. So we'll just blame those on the chrome flaking, I think. And then looking at the group for barrel 2, it just looks like the basic shotgun pattern that I've come to expect from Winchester M193. Barrel 1 had a 30-shot group size of 7.232 MOA and a mean radius of 1.563 MOA, which gives us an AZ score of just 90 yards. And barrel 2 did a little bit worse, with a 30-shot group size of 6.678 MOA and a mean radius of 1.660 MOA, which results in an AZ score of 85 yards. Barrel 1 had an average 10-shot group size of 6.0 MOA, and barrel 2 had an average 10-shot group size of 5.6 MOA. And moving on to the leaderboard, these barrels probably didn't do as bad as you think, since I've had some absolutely abysmal groups with this ammo. But barrel 1 came in 14th place out of 22 groups, and barrel 2 came in 17th place. Or, if we narrow things down to just chrome line barrels, barrel 1 came in 9th out of 14 groups, and barrel 2 came in 11th. And with that, we will head to our last group. Alright, last group for this video will be with Federal Gold Medal 77 grain series MatchKing for barrel 2 only. When I shot barrel 1, I only had enough range time to shoot 3 groups with it. And then when I did a brief inspection after that range trip, I saw the chrome flaking and figured I had gathered enough data for that barrel and didn't see the need to shoot it any further. So that's why we're only seeing barrel 2 with this ammo. Anyway, nothing out of the ordinary with this group. Shooting felt fine on my end. Brass continued ejecting forward. Recoil and bolt velocity felt fine. The chrono captured velocities for all the shots, and the Mantis missed a few. So we will finish up and then take a closer look. Alright, so here's all my velocity data for Federal Gold Medal 77 grain series MatchKings. And there are only 3 20-inch barrels here. And the Red Right Hand Chrome LMG HBAR barrel is the slowest of the 3, but not by a lot. Moving on to the standard deviations, the Chrome LMG HBAR had an SD of 20 feet per second, which is pretty close to the middle of what I've seen out of Federal Gold Medal. Shot 25 was the fastest, at 41 feet per second above average, and shot 27 was the slowest, at 61 feet per second below average. And rifle stability looked fine, at 99.6. Shots 4 and 8 drifted a little bit higher than the rest, but other than that, it's a pretty good looking group. 30-shot group size came in at 2.265 MOA, with a 30-shot mean radius of 0.504 MOA, which gives us an AZ score of 280 yards. The best 10-shot group was 1.1 MOA, with an average 10-shot group size of 1.4 MOA. And looking at the leaderboard, the Red Right Hand Chrome LMG HBAR barrel came in 12th place out of 21 groups. So, pretty close to the middle. And if we narrow things down to just chrome line barrels, the LMG HBAR came in 5th place out of 12 barrels. So, not too bad. Looking at the overall results, Barrel 1 had the best group of the day with the Hornady 73 grain ELDs, with an AZ score of 327 yards, compared to Barrel 2, which has an AZ score of 252 yards with that ammo. And Barrel 2 shot its best group with Federal Gold Medal 77 grain Sear MatchKings. Other than that, the two barrels shot pretty similar to one another, and the velocities were pretty close too. Given the chrome flaking in Barrel 1 and the blim and rough spot in Barrel 2, I would have thought that there was going to be a little bit more of a difference, but this is what I ended up with. Since these barrels are intended for use in an LMG or auto rifle, I think the groups that we saw would be adequate for that role. Obviously, the chrome issue in Barrel 1 is concerning to see, for a barrel intended for hard use. But Red Right Hand did act quickly when I communicated the issue that I had, and checked all their other inventory, and contacted their vendor to track down the issue. This is the third video in a row that I've had some chrome issues like this. The other barrels that have had chrome flaking have been the Black River Tactical and the LMT. So, unfortunately, this type of stuff tends to happen to chrome line barrels from time to time, and it's not isolated to a single brand. And that'll do it for this one. I'll see you next time. Later.